All right, we are live with safehome.org, and today we're talking all about how to de-escalate and diffuse dangerous situations. I'm Rob Gabriel, home security expert with safehome.org, and today we're here with retired SWAT commander and now owner of Survival Response LLC, Gene Petrino. How you doing, Gene?
Doing great, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And like always, we'll be doing live Q&A throughout. So if you have any questions at all, be sure to drop those in the chat and we'll get to them. And so just to get us started, Gene, what is de-escalation?
Well, it's the big buzzword. Everyone thinks it's the solution to a lot of things. But essentially, the idea of de-escalation is to influence a person to change their behavior instead of you forcing them to change the behavior. So it's kind of giving someone power, because a lot of times they feel like they don't have the control, which is what leads to this outburst that they have. Showing that they have the ability to make the change, to calm down and to do the right thing, in just about any situation.
Great, yeah. And so maybe talk about what de-escalation is not.
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
That because a lot of people think, well, if you look at a lot of officer involved shootings, they say, well, the police should have learned how to de-escalate. And the fact is, de-escalation doesn't always work, and it's actually biologically not possible to work in some circumstances.
Hmm.
Um, we're looking at changing a person from an emotional state to a logical state. And when they're in that emotional state, that's your limbic system. That's that midbrain portion of your body that controls all of these like fight or flight responses and things like that. So there's no logic based in that. It's really about a lot of fighting. And so that takes over all rational thoughts. There are some people, whether it's through the influence of drugs or alcohol or mental illness, that are incapable of reaching a level of logic and reason. And in those circumstances, you're not going to be able to you could do everything textbook wise, and it's just not going to work. So part of understanding de-escalation is identifying those situations when it will work and when it won't work. And that takes a lot of practice and training.
Sure. Yeah. And what are some situations where it is going to work, and then kind of juxtapose those against some situations where it won't work? So you mentioned, if someone's kind of on drugs and that sort of thing, but what are some other things you're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, drinking and alcohol and drugs are probably one of the biggest ones that people are going to face, where it's probably not going to work. And if it does, it's going to take a little bit longer. And that's the thing with de-escalation, is that it's a time game. You have to keep the conversation going, and there's a process where you're building rapport, so they start to trust you, and then you can use that trust to help influence their decision making. Because it really is about them making the decisions, not you making the decisions for them. They feel a lot of times that they have no control, and that's that. It's like cornering a wild animal.
Mhm.
That's how they're feeling. So you don't want to force them to make the decision if you don't have to. So thinking about, like I said, drugs and alcohol, that would be the time that it probably won't work, or is less likely to work. Mental illness, a lot of times, schizophrenics, things like that, you're not going to be able to get through. Personality disorders, you're probably not going to be able to get through a lot of times. Whereas if you're looking at a domestic disturbance, where it's spouses arguing with one another, and where tensions are really getting high, those have a higher likelihood of being able to de-escalate, as you spend time working on, like I said, building that rapport.
Hmm. Right. And then is there any kind of like mental checklist that you go through when you come face to face with a situation that has to be de-escalated? And I know you've dealt with this sort of thing throughout your career as a SWAT commander, so I'd love to hear about that, and maybe even some stories if you have some.
Yeah. So, there's a whole myriad of things to look at. A lot of times, the first thing, as far as on the job kind of situation, and even in real life, you really want to look at their hands. The first thing is your personal safety and the safety of the people you're with, right? You want to make sure they're not holding any weapons. If they're holding weapons, that's completely a much higher level of a situation than just someone that might hit you, push you, slap you, punch you, things like that. Um, if they're holding a knife, a bat, even a blunt object, a phone, like a heavy phone, or a book, anything that can be an improvised weapon. Those are things that you start to realize, okay, well, if they hit me with that, that's a lot dangerous. So you want to start working on, as far as mental checklists, do I have a distance between me and the person that's safe enough for me to react? And most of the time, you're not going to have that distance. The reality is, it takes a split second for someone to attack you, and it takes 2 to 3 times as long for you to react. So action always beats reaction. So as close as or as far as ways you think somebody is, they probably are still going to be able to get to you. But will you have enough time to at least protect yourself on some level? And that's something you have to think about. Um, there was a call that I had one time where it was a domestic disturbance, and it was a all out brawl between a daughter and a father, the daughter being the aggressor. And she ended up fighting. She runs into the kitchen. I go and chasing after her, and she grabs a knife, and I stop, and I didn't have a lot of space, but what I had was a big kitchen table between me and her. So I knew that for her to get over that table was going to be enough time for me to to do what I needed to do. And of course tried to talk her down. And at the time, in all honesty, I didn't have training on what to do and what not to do, not realizing that repetitive commands that a lot of police officers use are really something that escalates. When you say, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife, that doesn't help. That actually can sometimes actually increase the situation. But that's what I was doing, and she wouldn't, and I ended up using pepper spray on her, and it had zero impact on her. So again, when you talk about what de-escalation isn't always going to work, just like weapons don't always work, just like security systems in your house isn't always going to work. And that's, one of the things about security is it transfers in all areas of your life, not just home security. Everywhere, it's the same sort of concepts, that one thing isn't always going to work. Redundancy is really a big key. And in this situation, it was a time thing. I kept talking to her. I kept trying to get her to calm down. There were other things going on. The mom was also trying to somewhat attack me, trying to get me not to hurt her, and I wasn't going to hurt her. However, eventually, between me talking to her and the effects of the pepper spray taking over, she eventually put the knife down, and was able I was able to take her into custody. So that's just an example that, it's sometimes that time is more important than anything else, but that distance is really a valuable thing. So that's one of the big checklists of me, is my personal safety, the safety of who I'm with. Is there enough space to react or not, to avoid any direct sudden strikes? Because like I said, your reaction time is just much slower, and you're really not going to be able to prevent them from hitting you or attacking if you're too close.
Yeah, and you mentioned the limbic system and the flight or fight response, and I think about like training, like dog training, or say if you have an aggressive dog and it's going after another dog or a person, and you start yelling at the dog not to. What does that do? I mean, it only escalates the situation. It gets that fight or flight drive going, and they attack. And so I imagine that same way, when you're repeating those commands, drop the knife, that sort of thing really gets people's blood boiling. They don't really know what to do, and they're in that kind of that mental state, and they just
they're in a situation where you're now matching their energy. We talk a lot about when you're establishing rapport, you want to mirror someone's behaviors, especially like if you're interviewing someone. If they're sitting a certain way, leaning forward, you sit leaning forward. That's building this connection with. That's mirroring and parroting their behaviors. In de-escalation, you don't want to do that. You don't want to rise to their level. What you want to do is keep a very cool demeanor. And I think probably one of the best things that you can do is staying calm. It's very difficult. I think we've all been in a situation where we're fighting with a spouse, a parent, a brother, sister, whatever, and they're yelling at us, and then you instantly get mad, you get defensive, and you start yelling back. That's not what you want to do. And when we talk about de-escalation, if you think about the situations like road rage or stuff like that, it's hard not to get pulled into that. But the way that you successfully navigate getting out of these situations is to be able to control your own behaviors. If you can control your emotions and understand that what is happening to somebody is not necessarily meaning it's a reflection of you or happening to you, you're able to then be able to better use your logic and reasoning to get them to come to your side instead of you going to their side. Because again, the whole object is to get them to a situation where they're going from this irrational fight or flight to a logic and reason based thought of, okay, what am I doing? Why am I getting this angry? How do I resolve the situation. So that's a very key element, is really just trying to control your emotions. And that's probably the most critical part of the initial process.
Right. And so to unpack that a little bit more,
Mhm.
what like what sort of voice or body language or tone should we use to diffuse the tension or the situation a bit?
So really and truly, you want to stay calm. Staying calm, and any aggressive behavior that as posture you have, standing with your fists clenched and things like that, and just having a scowl on your face, that's not. You want to have a very blank look on your face, just like you're listening.
Mhm.
And even a lot of times, if you just tilt your head, that's one of the things that when like, think about your dog. We are talking about just now dogs, right?
Yeah.
When you get a dog's attention, they tilt their head. They're like, wait, what?
Hmm.
And that's a really good tactic to show someone that you're listening to them, because a lot of times these people are in a situation where they feel no one understands what they're going through, no one's on their side, no one's listening to them. Everyone can't. Why aren't they understanding me? I'm being very clear. So when you do these little things, that opens them up to this person starting to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But you have to talk to them. They could be screaming, talk in a very calm voice, a calm, rational voice. And what the goal is, again, is for them, they're going to realize, why am I yelling? Why are they being quiet? And they might even say, why? I know what you like. People, a lot of people know this tactic. I know what you're doing. Keep doing it. Say,
Right.
okay, well, I'm trying to, I'd like to help you. You know, you don't want to say calm down, but I'd like to help resolve the situation with you. Let's work together and find a way to do this.
Mhm.
Um, and again, you're gonna do all these things with active listening and just really paying attention. But your posture really has to be non-confrontational. Again, giving them space, because you don't want them to feel like they're cornered, they're backed in, and where they have to fight their way out. You want them to have their own space, right? That's a
Yeah.
very important part of it. So it's all of these little things.
Yeah. Great. And if you're in chat, please tell us you're here. We'd love to get some questions coming in. So if you have any burning questions, drop them in the chat. And then, Gene, you mentioned it's probably best to not say "calm down" to someone who's, up there in the fight or flight.
Yeah.
What are maybe some other things that we should not say to someone in this situation?
Well, anything accusational, okay?
Hmm.
You're not being reasonable, things like that. You need to calm down. This isn't getting us anywhere. If you're fighting against them, the whole thing is you want to get them on their situation, not, get them out of that mindset. So throwing out all these accusations and like kind of throwing the hot potato back to them, let them throw it at you, and then just hold on to it and just say, okay, well, how do I help this? And saying those things that are, I mean, anyone that's been married that's told their spouse to calm down probably won't do it again. It doesn't work. And it's happened to me where everyone's like, you need to calm down. I'm like, this guy's fighting me. What do you mean? I'm not going to calm down. It's happened
Right.
at work, where you're in the middle trying to take somebody in custody and you're like, no, they're actively fighting me.
Hmm.
Um, you want to be able to control that situation. So yeah, I mean, just very careful on any number of phrases that might come across as confrontational. It really, again, establishing that rapport, so you're showing that you're on their side to gain their trust, so that you can influence them to behave in the way that they need to get out of the situation.
Hmm. And so we have our first question coming in from the chat here. It's from autoinsurance.com. Hi, any tips for avoiding or diffusing road rage situations?
Oh, okay. So
Oh,
avoiding them, drive
yeah.
very good. Don't cut people off. Um, again, I talked about one of the best, most important skills to have with de-escalation is controlling your emotions. So if somebody cuts you off, if something happens to you that someone else does to you, how about not get mad? That's the first thing, because even if you just honk at them, you don't know what their situation is. And that might be enough for you to get it out. Like, you honked at them and you yelled at them or gave them the finger or whatever, but that might be the tipping point for them. That might
Hmm.
help you for a second, but for them, it's going to be something much worse. It could be the final straw that broke the camel's back, and they might now target you as the problem of everything that's resolved in their situation at the time, and they may now start to come after you. So, really and truly, the best thing that you can do is not get upset when something happens. People are bad drivers. People make mistakes. I mean, I've pulled out in front of someone before that legitimately I didn't see them. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And the guy pulled up me, and unfortunately we got to the light, and he pulled up and he rolls the window out, and before I go, I'm really sorry. I did not see you. I'll be more careful. I apologize. And he looked at me and like I totally took all the air out of his balloon. He was like, okay. He had nothing, because I didn't deny it. I knew that I made a mistake, and I legitimately, I wasn't trying to be reckless. It just was one of those things I didn't see. And there was no reason for him to go on at that point. And that's the whole idea, is if you control the situation, if you control your emotions, he had every right to be mad at me. He had every right to be screaming at me. And if he did, I would have said, yeah, you're right. You're totally right. I apologize. And I would have let it go. So controlling your emotions is really the most important thing. Don't be chasing after anybody, but if someone starts chasing you, things like that, don't engage with them. Don't be honking back at them. Don't be flipping them off. Don't be yelling at them. Call 911, and just drive safely until you can get to someone that can help you. Preferably law enforcement. Call for help. If they get out of their car and start approaching you, make sure, you have an avenue of escape. Don't get caught up. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you can't. But if you're able to keep a lane open, that if they get out of their car at a light, that you can pull around them, that's something that you're going to want to do. But again, just, call for help and just keep your emotions in check. That's really the biggest thing that I can suggest.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah. And is it also maybe wise to kind of get out of the traffic pattern if you can, to kind of like maybe go into a parking lot, kind of breathe a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can get away from them, if you have a chance to turn off while they're forced to go straight, that's the best thing to do. And just give it a second, and just then get back on the road that you're going, and just, take a moment to gain your composure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's road rage is a serious problem these days, and I feel like it's getting worse and worse.
Yep.
It's hard to go a week, where I live anyways, without running into someone who's, aggressive or agitated behind the wheel. So,
oh yeah, no doubt.
Thanks for that question. And we have another one here. This is from MD. It says, how do you determine when you should call a non-emergency number, which is 311 in California, rather than calling 911? It's a great question.
And so that's a tough one to answer, because there's so many variables that go into it. If you feel that you are in imminent danger, call 911. So if someone is, honestly, in a road rage situation, if someone gets out of their car or actively tries to run you off the road, that's imminent danger. Okay. If you are at the grocery store and standing in line and someone starts yelling at you and they're just screaming because you're writing a check or something like, something that you like, doesn't happen that much anymore. But if you're taking too long checking out and they're getting angry at you, that's not an emergency. That's not anything. That's just someone that's screaming, and you probably don't even need to call non-emergency. And a lot of those times people will probably call on your behalf if there's enough commotion. But really, whether to call 911 or like you're saying, a non-emergency number, really it comes down to, is there an imminent threat? Are you about to be attacked? Are you being attacked? Or is your life in danger? And that's really where you want to go. And you'll know. I mean, there's a lot of times, like I said, if you see someone that is really, in that we call it contaminated thinking. So where a lot of times they aren't thinking rationally. If there's, if they're under the influence, if they're, if their behaviors show that they're probably mentally ill or completely out of that rational thought process, and you feel it's dangerous, you're better off calling 911. You really are. It's better to be safe than sorry, because again, it takes time for law enforcement to get to your location. And, average times vary depending on cities and municipalities and all that. But even if it takes 2 minutes, 2 minutes is a really long time if you're fighting. And it's, most fights are over very quickly. So the sooner you call, the better, but don't just jump to 911 if someone's yelling at you. It's not always the case.
Sure. Yeah. 2 minutes is probably an eternity when you're fighting with someone.
Yeah. Anyone studying like martial arts knows.
Yeah.
It's a long time. Well, hold a plank. Try to hold a plank for 2 minutes.
Right.
Tell me that's not a long time, right?
Yeah. And then multiply that by like 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's right. What do you do if someone starts following you in a parking lot? I know that we covered this one maybe a month or two ago. You're
Yeah.
maybe out at night, coming home from a bar or something or a restaurant, out
Yeah.
walking, someone's following
So
you.
so there's a couple scenarios in which you're going to want to confront them. And there's a couple that you're not going to want to confront them. If you feel that, if it's late at night and there's nobody else around, the best thing you could probably do is get to somewhere where there's people. Because if there's no one around and you're screaming for help, no one's around. That's not going to do you any good, right?
Hmm.
If it's during the day and someone's just following you for no apparent reason, so take out road rage, take out any other personal conflict. If they're just following you, in all honesty, I think the best thing to do is turn on and go, "Hey, what do you want?" And just confront them, because again, most people in an attack situation aren't going to want to fight somebody, right? They don't want to. They want the easy prey, not the person that's going to confront them back.
Right.
Uh, However, if it's a road rage situation where they get out of you're in the parking lot, they get out of the car and they're coming towards you, get back in your car, drive away if you can, go inside the store, just get away from that person as quickly as you can, as you can do that. It's not worth confronting someone who, like I said, aggressively is coming at you. That would be I would probably say the best way to handle those two situations, because they definitely are different.
Sure. Yeah. And I remember one of the tips you had mentioned a month or two ago when we were talking about this was purchasing one of those small, like, emergency
Yeah.
alerts or
Yeah.
alarms
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can press a button and it sounds a siren, right? That
Yep.
I thought that was a great tip. So,
Yeah, those are probably one of my favorite safety devices that you can have,
mhm,
because again, the noise, first of all, that the noise is going to distract everybody, including the attacker.
yeah.
It's going to draw attention and things like that. And when we're talking about de-escalating, pulling somebody out of that thought process is sometimes that noise or distraction like that is like, whoa, how did that happen? Like,
Mhm,
it'll get them off that loop that they're in. So sometimes that's not a bad thing either for
right.
de-escalating. It doesn't always work that way, but sometimes I have seen that happen.
Nice. Um, so kind of we were in public places, whether
Mhm.
it's like out driving, there's a road rage incident, or we're being followed home from the club. What happens when it's in your own neighborhood? How should someone react, say, if a neighbor confronts them or turns agitated or heated?
Well, you can see that online all the time now, is the neighbor disputes. Probably one
Yeah,
of the most watched videos, right? Of the neighbor doesn't like the fence, or that kind of thing.
right.
Um, so again, the whole idea is building rapport,
Mhm,
especially in a neighborhood situation. You're not going to get along with everybody, but if you can create some kind of a situation where there's a tolerance for whatever there is, that's great. That would be the objective. You don't have to be friends, but you should be civil to each other, and try to respect each other's boundaries. That would be ideal. Now, in order to do that, you really have to establish that rapport, establish that trust with them, and find that point where you can say, okay, here's where we are, here's where we need to be. How do we get there together?
mhm,
Um, and that takes time. And again, that's where de-escalation comes in. It's really getting them to realize, instead of being mad at you, work with you so you can tolerate each other, so it's not miserable living together, because neither of you probably are going to leave.
right.
And it's not easy just to pick up and move. It's a lot of moving parts to that. So it's
Mhm,
easier to try to uh, I'll use the phrase befriend them than not. And again, how do you do that? By getting them out of that fight or flight into from that irrational limbic system thought process into that forebrain, where it's the reason and logic, and saying, okay, we have to live here together. We don't have to be friends. You don't like me doing this. I'll be, cognizant of that. I don't like you doing this. You do that. And then we can just keep a balance, and working together that way. And it always is possible, but again, if they're drinking and things like that, you may want to wait until another day for that conversation to be had. You might just want to go inside. If they're coming up to your house and they won't leave, then you won't want to call police if that's the situation.
yeah. What do you think about, like, writing maybe in a letter, like a handwritten letter, so it's unemotional, not in the heat of the moment, that sort of thing? Would that work?
I will say that it is not the right way to go. And the
No?
reason I say that is, have you ever sent a text that was misinterpreted?
No, never.
So
All
you're
the
the one
time.
person. Yeah.
Oh,
So
yes.
you can't tell the intent. You can't tell them saying, "I apologize." You say, "Oh, sorry that this happened." They're gonna be like, "Oh, sorry this happened." Like they might read
Mm,
it in a different tone of voice that you didn't intend it to be.
okay.
So a letter might come across that way. Now, to say, "Hey, send a letter. Hey, I'd like to sit with you one. Can we meet up and talk? I'd like to resolve this with you.
Mm,
Can we?" That's one thing. But to get into the specific details of it, I wouldn't suggest that. But maybe a letter to say, "Hey, let's can we try something? Can we try to fix the situation?" That's okay to say that,
sure.
but
Yeah.
a long lengthy letter probably will not work. Probably have a backfire effect.
Yeah. Do police often get involved in these kinds of disputes? Just like, neighbor against neighbor
Oh,
all
daily.
the time? Yeah.
Daily. Yeah, it's a daily thing. Civil matter complaints were one of the ones that we had. I mean, all the time, all the
Mhm.
time. People that either having parties all the time, too many people, so their guests are parking in front of the other person's house. There's trash in the road from these people. They're walking their dog on their property. Their cameras are pointed on my property. Their lights are pointed on my property. All these circumstances that come into it. Yeah, it's a normal thing, and again, now the officer has to de-escalate both sides,
Mhm.
and it gets tricky, but you learn to like say, look, you you guys are both here. This is what they're asking is not completely unreasonable. I looked at where the lights were. Yeah, they are shining right in their window. Is there a way you can shield that a little bit? Is there a way you can fix that light so it's pointing more down or things like that? So
Yeah.
there's things that you can do and from that aspect of working from as a third party to intervene a little bit easier because you're completely uninvolved in it. So the emotion level is, it's not an issue for you.
Sure.
But when
Right.
you're the neighbor, it gets more difficult. And then again, controlling your own emotions is really the key.
Yeah. Um, what role does situational awareness play in de-escalation?
Everything, everything. I mean, again, awareness plays a role in everyday life, every aspect of
Mhm.
your life, whether it's when you're at home, when you're out in public, when you're dealing with people one on one. Like I said, one of the things that you said, the mental checklist that I would go over was, do they have a weapon, or am I going to be able to talk to them and be able to resolve the situation without using force? That was my as law enforcement. How do I not use force in this situation to get them to comply by getting them to think of the solution themselves or helping them guide down the path of that. I'm really mad. I want to get better and kind of walk down that anxiety, rage, fear, whatever it is that's driving their emotions into a situation where like, okay, this is not that big a deal, or this is how I can get myself out of this, and this is what we can do. And they're not after me; they're trying to help me through this. So yeah, it's tough, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And earlier you'd mentioned even like, do you have something maybe between you and them, like a table or something you can get around?
Hmm.
Those sorts of things. That's all situational awareness as
Yeah,
well. So,
yeah.
um, yeah. And so, chat. I mean, if you have any more questions, would love to get some more questions in if you have them. I see that we do have some viewers online. We love interacting with you guys that way.
Yeah.
And then, so Gene, as far as like training for de-escalation goes, not we can talk about police is one thing, but just for civilians, is this something that you can train for and should train for, or is
Yeah, yeah,
most of the
there's a
training?
lot of classes out there. There's some online. I do online classes and in-person classes. There's a lot of organizations that are out there that do teach the same concepts. And the reality is, whether it's law enforcement or not, the training that we provide was from a law enforcement standpoint, which is the highest level. That's where you're looking at these situations where it is could be very easily life or death. And if you're dealing at that level of training, you can handle everything below it. And that's the whole concept of it, is that you want to be able to take the hardest kind of situation and navigate through that. And if you learn that process, then you can deal with the neighbor complaint who's just mad because you're walking their dog on their driveway or their yard or whatever.
Right.
So there's books out there too. There's a lot of books out there. So
Yeah. Feel free to plug anything that you have. Be happy to take it.
um,
So I have some more questions for you, but yeah.
yeah, one of the books that I read a long time ago is Think Thinking Fast and Slow. Thinking Fast and Slow was one of them. I forget who wrote it.
Yeah.
Another one was Verbal Judo. That's an old book and kind of a funny one. And but those things that kind of teach you how to navigate those conversations are really important.
Right. Any tips on how to stay calm in the heat of the moment, like breathing techniques or like mindset techniques, things like that?
Well, the first thing you have to realize is that their emotion is not your emotion, right?
Hmm.
Like most of what they're feeling, if not everything that they're feeling, is not a product of you. It's a product of what's going on inside of them. Um, I used this the other day with someone and talking about, if a child walks up to you and says, "You're ugly," you're gonna be like, "Kid, just," like, you're gonna laugh and you're not gonna think much about it, right? If an adult did that, you'd be all angry. Well, why? They really they don't matter to you in that sense, and you shouldn't take everything personal. And that's the whole idea, is that think about this person as almost a child who is having so much trouble coping with whatever is in their life. It really has nothing to do with you. I was on a call years ago. It was a domestic violence call, and my partner was with the husband. I was with the wife, and the husband is screaming at my partner. I mean, every profanity, F you, just screaming. And he just stood there and he stared, and he was talking to the guy, doing everything. He did everything perfectly. And at one point, I'm like, I think we're gonna have to arrest this guy. And he just kept screaming at my partner. And then all of a sudden he goes, he
Just had to let
relaxed.
it out.
You got everything out. Sometimes that's all you have to do.
Yeah.
So letting, my partner didn't take anything he said personal. They didn't know each other. It wasn't like he was mad at him for any reason. And my partner
Hmm.
knew that. And that's the whole idea, is that you don't know this person. You don't, most of the time you don't know what's going on in their life. There was a statistic that I read a few years ago that 1/3 of the people that you meet, so 1 in 3 people, are going through a crisis and you don't even know it.
Wow.
So there's 2 of us, you and I, facing each other. A third person, unless you're in a crisis, or there's somebody else that's closely tied to us that's going through some kind of crisis that we probably have no idea of. So you
Sure.
don't know. People mask their emotions all the time, but that only lasts so long, and then something's going to trigger them. And you're going to think, what did I do? It's not about you, it's about them. So understanding that mindset of, when someone is in this situation where they're having trouble controlling their emotions, it really has nothing to do with you. It has to do with their inability to find a way to resolve whatever it is, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, whatever is driving that emotional state that they're in. It's not about you. It's about them. And the
Yeah.
best thing that you can do to help them is to stay calm.
Hmm.
And the best way to get through it safely is by staying calm.
Yeah.
You can't think, we talked about that, by being trained on what to do. And we talked about the what if game. What would I do if I got home and someone, ramped my car, or the front door was kicked in? Having that mindset of what would I do, trains your brain to react instead of freezing up, or having that fight, flight, or freeze. You're training yourself. and
Hmm.
and that's kind of the same concept here, is when someone is yelling at you. Being calm is you're training yourself to stay in that state, so that if they do attack, you can rationally think, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Because now you're not in a fight or flight mode. Now you're like, okay, if they come at me, I already know that I'm going to step to my left, I'm going to push them off me, or I'm going to make sure I have this table in front of me. I'm going to make sure that I can get to the door and close the door fast enough. I'm going to make sure that if I have a weapon, God forbid I have to use it, I can get to it quickly. Um,
Yeah.
so having that clean thinking on your side of things, that calm aspect, really will come into play as a benefit.
Sure. And I imagine, the way that we react to a hostile person, dep in many cases, probably depends on like who we have with us. So, like for instance, you have your girlfriend with you, someone wants to start something, your ego's involved. You don't want to
Mhm.
be, one upped in front of your girl, so
Yeah.
you suddenly, chest out. And then I imagine if you have kids in your car, someone cuts you off. Now you want to, that plays into it, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting, because the people that I know that are fighters, that are, you know, very good at jujitsu or Muay Thai, any of the MMA, and anything mixed martial arts, any of that stuff.
Mhm.
They're the calmest, most humble people. Um, and I think I think last month there was a guy who was an MMA fighter, and he was at a baseball game, and he got pushed, and he just smiling at this guy that's much bigger than me, just smiling at him, and he was all calm, and he had his girlfriend with him, and they're like, this guy has no idea that this little guy could beat the heck out of the other guy.
Yeah.
And it's that calmness, and that calmness does help. Again, your being calm is going to help de-escalate them. Yeah, so it's interesting to see how you have to control your ego. You have to control that because it's not that, you know, fighting is not that fun. It hurts, you know, and especially a
Mhm.
street fight, they get deadly very quickly, not just because of weapon, but I mean, getting thrown onto the ground, hitting your head on the pavement, that can kill you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's just and understanding that life's short. It's not worth the fighting. You know, it's easier. And most of the time, the people that are the loudest are the ones that aren't going to fight you. They're the ones that just like to mouth off and that they probably can't fight anyway. So,
Right.
staying quiet and calm is also a silent signal to a lot of people. Don't mess with this guy because they probably know what they're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then MD in the chat wrote, years ago, we had a neighbor from hell revving loud motorcycle engines and blasting loud music. We enlisted the support of our neighborhood watch commander, who was able to resolve the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
nice.
that's it. And that's, again, that's it. A lot of times it just comes down to having a conversation. Some people really, believe it or not, they're ignorant to the fact that what they like might not be what you like.
Yeah.
You know, they may be like, "Oh, it's a great song. I'm going to listen to it. I'm going to blast it. This is great." And you might hate that song, you know, and it might be disturbing to other people. So having those conversations are really important. But it's, again, the way, instead of coming at them as from an accusational point, come at them like, "Hey, listen, here's a situation. You're a good neighbor. This is just something that's bothering me. How is there something we can do to kind of, can you not do this during these hours and these hours?" Like, try to find that compromise and just having a very calm conversation. Even if they get angry at first, say, "Well, no, I'm not here to fight about it because I understand where you're coming from. This is what you like. However, you know, it is disturbing to us as well. And what can we do? Because I don't want to be a bad neighbor. And I know you're not trying to be a bad neighbor. How do we work this out?" And a lot of times once you start to create that rapport, you know, you get solutions a lot faster. So yeah, getting the help of of somebody that's not directly involved, like the neighborhood commander or watch commander, was that what they call them? That
Yeah.
was a good move. Definitely.
Yeah. I imagine, being that voice of reason will only help kind of improve that long-term relationship. If you're living next to this person for years and potentially decades, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then it might actually encourage them to have that voice of reason next time. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
We talked a little bit earlier about like people on drugs or under the influence. Is it possible to de-escalate someone who is under the influence, or someone who's mentally unstable, or do you just get out of Dodge?
So you can, but it's usually doesn't last.
Yeah,
I can tell you that I've been in situations where I've dealt with people intoxicated who were your best friend at 1 second, and they start getting mad, and you calm them down again, and the next thing they want to fight you again, and they want to calm down again. Like it's just they're not able to maintain that reason.
yeah,
So it's better for you to get out of the situation rather than stay at it. If you can get out of it, get out. It's
sure.
just the easier thing to do. Definitely.
That makes sense. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much, Gene.
Mhm.
And everyone, please come back and join us for our next live stream, which I believe is going to be June 17th.
Sounds right.
So, yeah, and we'll have Gene back again and a lot of exciting topics to come. So, yeah, thank you, Gene. Appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.